Can you believe a simple act of parking my car on my own property led to a full-blown 911 call and a Karen getting trespassed by the sheriff? Was I in the wrong here, or did she completely overstep her bounds? I still can't wrap my head around the audacity, and I need you to tell me if you would have handled it any differently. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought, when I decided to finally fulfill a lifelong dream of owning a little slice of the countryside. I'd always envisioned myself escaping the city, having some land, maybe a few animals, and just enjoying the peace and quiet that only rural living can offer. After years of saving, countless hours poring over real estate listings, and a good deal of driving around dusty back roads, I found it, a beautiful, albeit slightly neglected ranch property. It was about 20 acres with an older farmhouse that needed some TLC, a barn that was practically falling apart, and vast open fields that promised endless possibilities. The previous owner had let it go a bit, but I saw the potential, the quiet charm, and the freedom it offered. It was located just outside a small town, far enough to feel remote but close enough for essentials. The real kicker, though, was that it was part of a very small, almost obscure homeowners association. Now, I'm not usually one for HOAs. I've heard all the horror stories, seen the power trips, and generally prefer to live without someone dictating the color of my mailbox or the height of my grass. But this HOA seemed different. It was described as mostly dormant, existing primarily to maintain a shared private road that led to the various properties, including mine. The annual fees were minimal, and the rules seemed to be mostly about common sense and maintaining the rural aesthetic, or so I thought. The listing agent assured me it was a non-issue, a mere formality. They mostly just handle the road maintenance fund, nothing to worry about, he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Famous last words, right? I closed on the property in late spring, and the first few weeks were a blur of excitement and hard work. I was constantly there, cleaning, planning renovations, and just generally soaking in the atmosphere of my new home. I bought a beat-up old pickup truck specifically for the ranch work, and it quickly became my main mode of transport to and from the property. Since the farmhouse wasn't livable yet, I wasn't actually living there, but I was spending every waking moment I could. I'd drive out, park my truck, and get to work. The property had a long gravel driveway that led from the private road to the farmhouse, and then a large open area near the barn that I used for parking. It was my property, my driveway, my land, or so I believed. One sunny afternoon, I was pulling up to the ranch, windows down, enjoying the smell of fresh-cut grass from a neighboring field. I turned off the main road onto the private road, a well-maintained gravel path that served maybe 6 properties in total. My ranch was the last one on this road, meaning I had to drive past all the others to get to mine. As I approached my driveway, I noticed a car parked along the side of the private road just past my property line but before the turnaround at the very end. It was a rather pristine silver SUV, the kind that looks like it's never seen a speck of dirt. I didn't think much of it, assuming it belonged to a delivery driver or maybe someone visiting one of the other properties. I pulled into my driveway, drove past the house, and parked my truck in my usual spot near the dilapidated barn. I hopped out, ready to tackle a mountain of weeds that had sprung up around the old well, when I heard a car door slam. I turned to see a woman striding purposefully towards my property line, hands on her hips, a severe expression on her face. She was probably in her late 50s or early 60s, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a matching pantsuit that seemed wildly out of place in the rural setting. This, my friends, was Karen. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and carrying in the quiet afternoon air. I paused, a little taken aback. I hadn't seen anyone else around, and I certainly didn't recognize her. "Yes?" I replied, trying to be polite, though a small knot of unease was already forming in my stomach. Her gaze swept over my property, lingering a little too long on my trusty mud-splattered pickup truck. "Are you the new owner of this property?" she demanded, her tone implying I had already committed some grave transgression. "I am," I confirmed, wondering what in the world this was about. "Well, I'm Carol Jenkins," she announced, as if her name should strike fear into the hearts of mere mortals. "I'm the head of the HOA, and I need to inform you that you are in violation." Violation? My heart sank a little. I hadn't even finished unpacking, and I was already in trouble with the HOA. "I'm sorry, in violation of what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She huffed, a sound that clearly conveyed her exasperation with my ignorance. "Parking. You are parking incorrectly." I blinked. Incorrectly? I'm parked on my own property in my own driveway. Where exactly am I supposed to park? She pointed a perfectly manicured finger towards my truck. That vehicle is an eyesore. And furthermore, it's a commercial vehicle. I looked at my pickup truck, which was clearly a personal vehicle, albeit a well-used one. It wasn't branded, didn't have any commercial plates, and was certainly not being used for any commercial purpose at that moment. It's not a commercial vehicle, ma'am. It's my personal truck, I explained patiently, and I'm parked well within my property lines. She sniffed disdainfully. That's beside the point. The HOA rules state that all vehicles must be parked in a garage or behind a privacy fence. Your vehicle is clearly visible from the private road. I stared at her. There's no garage here yet, and the rules I saw in the bylaws only applied to permanent residential parking. Once someone was actually living here, I'm just here for the day working on the place. The rules apply at all times, young man, she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. You are an unsightly nuisance to the aesthetic of our community. This is a high-end development, not some junkyard. High-end development? It was a collection of aging ranches, some with horses, some with cows, most with vehicles far less pristine than mine. And my truck was just a truck. It wasn't broken down, wasn't leaking fluids, wasn't an actual junkyard vehicle. It was simply present. I tried to reason with her. Look, I'm renovating the farmhouse. Once that's done, I'll build a proper garage. Until then, where do you suggest I park? I'm not going to leave my tools and materials in an unsecured vehicle parked at the end of the road. That is not my concern, she declared, her eyes narrowing. Your concern is to adhere to the rules. If you cannot park it in a garage, then it must be out of sight. You are creating a negative impression for potential buyers. Potential buyers? There hadn't been a property for sale on that road in years, save for mine. Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm the owner of this property. I'm not a potential buyer, and I'm currently the only person here. She bristled at my tone. Don't you dare disrespect me. I've been on this HOA board for 15 years. I know the rules better than anyone. If you don't move that vehicle immediately, I will be forced to take further action. I sighed, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. I had just wanted to enjoy my new ranch, and here I was, barely moved in, dealing with an HOA zealot. What exactly do you propose I do, Carol? I need my truck to haul materials and tools. I'm literally working here. She gestured vaguely towards the private road. Park it off the private road. Somewhere less visible, perhaps behind the trees down by the cul-de-sac. That's not my property. Carol, I can't just park my vehicle on someone else's land or on a shared common area without permission. It's the common area for the HOA members, she retorted. You are an HOA member. Park it there. Out of sight. I shook my head. No, I'm parking on my own property. I will ensure it's not blocking any access roads, which it isn't, but it's staying here. This is your final warning, she shrieked, her face turning a rather alarming shade of red. If that vehicle is still visible by tomorrow morning, I will involve the authorities. And with that, she spun on her heel and marched back to her pristine silver SUV, slamming the door with unnecessary force. I watched her drive away, shaking my head in disbelief. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just one of those types and it would blow over. I continued working on the ranch, though her visit had definitely soured my mood. The next morning, I drove back out to the ranch, determined to ignore Carol and just get on with my work. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something new. There, placed strategically on the edge of my property line, right where my truck had been parked, was a bright orange cone, and next to it, a handwritten note, laminated and taped to a small stake, read, "No parking, HOA violation. Further action will be taken." My jaw clenched. This woman was seriously escalating things. I picked up the cone and the note, tossed them into the back of my truck, and proceeded to park in my usual spot. I spent the day clearing brush, repairing a leaky faucet, and generally trying to forget about Carol. I assumed she'd just put out another cone, and I'd toss that one too. I was wrong. The next day, when I arrived, there were 2 cones, and a new, much more formal-looking notice, printed on official HOA letterhead, citing unapproved parking of a commercial vehicle and threatening fines. This was getting ridiculous. I decided it was time to actually read the HOA bylaws more thoroughly than I had during the purchase. I spent that evening poring over the dense legal jargon, highlighting anything that seemed relevant to parking. What I found was interesting. The bylaws did have clauses about parking, but they specifically referred to permanent residential parking and long-term storage of vehicles. They stated that vehicles stored on lots must be screened from view by a garage or approved fencing. However, there was absolutely nothing about temporary parking during construction or renovation, nor was there anything restricting what types of personal vehicles could be parked on one's own property, even if they looked like work trucks. Furthermore, the definition of commercial vehicle in the bylaws referred to vehicles actively used for commercial purposes, with appropriate signage and commercial license plates. My truck had none of that. It was registered as a personal vehicle. Carol was misinterpreting or perhaps outright fabricating rules to suit her own agenda. I drafted a polite but firm letter to the HOA board, referencing the specific sections of the bylaws and explaining why my parking was not in violation. I sent it via certified mail, expecting a reasonable discussion. What I got instead was silence for a few days, followed by a series of increasingly aggressive emails from Carol, warning me of impending fines and legal action. She CC'd the entire HOA board, but no one else responded. It seemed she was the only one truly bothered by my truck. So that's the situation I was in, facing an unreasonable HOA president who was clearly on a power trip, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just given in and parked your truck off your property to avoid the hassle? Or would you have stood your ground, knowing you were in the right and risked further confrontation? Tell me, what would you have done? I decided I wasn't going to back down. This was my property and I was not going to be bullied by someone making up rules. The ranch was a sanctuary for me and I refused to let her spoil it. I continued to park my truck in my usual spot. For a few more days, nothing happened. I thought perhaps my letter had finally gotten through, or that she had realized she didn't have a leg to stand on. Boy, was I naive. One Saturday morning, I was at the ranch early, planning to spend the entire day working on the barn. I had a full day of demolition ahead of me, and I was eager to get started. I pulled up my driveway, parked my truck, and was just about to head into the barn when I heard the unmistakable wail of a siren in the distance. My heart immediately leaped into my throat. There was no way this could be for me, right? I looked down the private road and sure enough, a sheriff's patrol car was slowly making its way towards my property. It pulled to a stop just outside my property line and 2 deputies got out. And standing right next to their car, looking smug as can be, was Carol. She had called the sheriff. My blood ran cold. This was completely over the top. The deputies approached me, their faces neutral but their posture indicating a serious situation. "Sir, we received a 911 call regarding a parking violation and trespassing." One of them, a younger deputy with a serious demeanor, stated. My jaw nearly hit the ground. Trespassing? On my own property? Carol immediately interjected, her voice dripping with self-importance. "Yes, officer. This man, the new owner, has been repeatedly violating HOA rules. He parks his unsightly commercial vehicle where it's visible to everyone, and he has ignored all my warnings and official notices." The older deputy, a seasoned officer who looked like he'd seen it all, raised an eyebrow at Carol. "Ma'am, a parking violation is typically not a 911 emergency, and trespassing usually involves someone unauthorized on a property." He then turned to me. "Sir, can you explain the situation?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Officers, I'm the owner of this property. I bought it a few months ago. This woman, Carol Jenkins, is the head of the HOA. She's upset because I'm parking my personal pickup truck in my own driveway, on my own land, while I'm working on renovating the farmhouse. She claims it's a commercial vehicle and an eyesore, and that I'm violating HOA rules. I pulled out my property deed, which I always kept in my truck's glove compartment for situations just like this. Here's my deed showing I'm the legal owner. And here are the HOA bylaws, I said, producing the highlighted copy I had prepared. You can see there's no rule preventing me from parking my personal vehicle here, nor any specific restriction on the type of personal vehicle. And I'm certainly not trespassing on my own property. The older deputy took the documents, his eyes scanning them carefully. He looked at my truck, then back at Carol, who was practically vibrating with indignation. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now noticeably firmer, "can you explain why you believe this gentleman is trespassing?" Carol spluttered. "Well, he's violating the rules. He's causing a public nuisance. He's ignoring the HOA's authority. It's practically the same thing as trespassing. The younger deputy barely managed to suppress a sigh. Ma'am, violating an HOA rule is a civil matter, not a criminal one. And it certainly isn't trespassing if he owns the property. But he's an eyesore, and he's ruining the property values, she wailed, clearly losing her composure. The older deputy handed my documents back to me. Sir, you are clearly the legal owner of this property. You are parking your vehicle on your own land. There is no criminal offense here related to your parking. He then turned his full attention to Carol, his expression hardening. Now, ma'am, you called 911, which is for emergencies. For a non-emergency situation, that's a misuse of emergency services. Furthermore, he paused, and his gaze swept over the private road where her silver SUV was still parked. I noticed your vehicle is parked partially on the private road. Is that your property? Carol blinked, momentarily stunned by the shift in focus. Well, no, it's the HOA's private road. We all use it. And do you have permission from all the other property owners to park your vehicle there indefinitely, obstructing a shared access way? He pressed. Well, no, but I'm the HOA president. I was just waiting for you, she stammered, clearly flustered. Ma'am, parking on a private road, even one maintained by an HOA, without explicit permission from all easement holders, could be considered a form of obstruction. And if you are not the owner of the specific plot of land you're standing on, you could be considered trespassing yourself. Carol's face went from red to a rather alarming shade of puce. This is outrageous. I'm the one who called you. He's the one in violation. The older deputy ignored her protestations. He pulled out his notepad. Ma'am, based on the information we have, this gentleman is lawfully on his property, and his parking is not a criminal matter. However, your persistent and unfounded harassment, including calling 911 for a non-emergency, is a concern. And your current location, standing on private property that is not yours, without permission, to harass a property owner, coupled with your vehicle obstructing a shared access, could very well constitute trespassing and obstruction. He looked at me. Sir, do you want to press charges for harassment or trespassing? Given she's currently on the edge of your property to confront you, and parked in a manner that obstructs your access. I hesitated. I didn't want to get into a huge legal battle, but I also wanted this to stop. I just want her to leave me alone and stop bothering me on my own property, I said. The deputy nodded. He turned back to Carol. Ma'am, I am going to issue you a warning for misuse of 911 services. And furthermore, since you are currently on private property and the owner has requested you leave, I am now officially trespassing you from this property and the immediate vicinity around it. You are to return to your vehicle, remove it from the private road, and not approach this property or its owner again. If you continue to harass him or misuse emergency services, further action will be taken. Carol was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. The younger deputy then chimed in, pointing towards her SUV. Ma'am, please move your vehicle now. It's blocking the road. She finally found her voice, a squeaky, indignant sound. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. The older deputy gave her a stern look. Ma'am, your role in the HOA does not give you the right to harass your neighbors or misuse emergency services. Now please comply. Seeing the unwavering resolve in the deputies' faces, Carol finally deflated. She stomped back to her silver SUV, her perfectly coiffed hair looking a little disheveled now. She got in, started the engine, and peeled away down the private road, kicking up a cloud of gravel in her wake. The deputies stayed for a few more minutes, ensuring she was truly gone. The older deputy then turned to me, a small, knowing smile finally gracing his lips. Sorry you had to deal with that, sir. Some people just don't understand boundaries. You're good to go. If she bothers you again, call us and we'll handle it. I thanked them profusely, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. They wished me good luck with my renovations and drove off. And that was the last I ever saw of Carol Jenkins at my property. I heard through the grapevine a few weeks later that she had been censured by the rest of the HOA board for her actions and was eventually voted out of her position. It turned out the other residents were just as tired of her antics as I was, and my stand against her had finally given them the courage to act. The HOA is now run by a much more reasonable person, and my ranch life has been blissfully free of any further parking violations. So, that's my story of how a Karen calling 911 on me for parking my car on my own ranch ended up with her getting trespassed by the sheriff. It was a wild ride, and definitely not how I imagined my introduction to rural living would be. But it taught me a valuable lesson about standing up for yourself and knowing your rights. Like this video if you were on my side in this whole absurd situation. Subscribe for more crazy stories like this because I've got a feeling country living has a lot more surprises in store for me. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did she deserve it? Would you have done the same? I'll see you all in the next story.